Well, I think we're very much still at the stage with this earthquake, which so often happens in these natural disasters, where we're just trying to piece together just how bad the impact has been, just how far the impact has spread, where it's hit, how urban it is, how many people have been caught up. And we don't have specific answers on that at the moment. But certainly, I think the indications are that there's some seriousness to what's happened, that there are many people caught up in this, possibly many injured, perhaps many casualties as well. But we just don't know the answers to those numbers at the moment. As you said, there's 6.8 magnitude earthquake. It's being registered as level 7 on Japan's kind of internal seismic scale. They use their own kind of measure for these things. Level 7 is kind of the highest that Japan kind of affords to these quakes. So a high-level earthquake for sure. It's hit Kyushu Island, which is the southernmost of Japan's 4 main islands. And crucially, unlike some quakes that we've seen in Japan in the last sort of 6 months to a year that have been in slightly more rural areas, the epicenter of this one seems to have been in a slightly more urban location. And of course, that means the potential for much more damage. It's also being described by Japan's authorities as a very shallow earthquake, only about 10 kilometers. And that, they say, means that there is more potential for damage and more potential for aftershocks as well, which certainly Japan's authorities are really warning people of. And we know there's been a lot of measures and impact already. Things like the bullet trains in that region are all down at the moment, possibly thousands of homes without electricity at the moment. We know authorities have said that there's damage to roads, to bridges, to buildings, and so on. But I think all the attention at the moment, or much of the attention at the moment, is on this shopping mall, which appears to have partially collapsed. So what we know at the moment, it appears is that a second-story sort of floor on that shopping centre appears to have collapsed. Authorities are saying that there are many people trapped in there at the moment. They're not saying anything at the moment about casualties, but some of the pictures that are appearing on Japanese state media and on social media as well appear to show what looks like very extensive damage. So it looks very likely that we might be talking about mass casualties in that shopping centre at the moment. But we don't have much more other than to say that the quake hit, that there were reports in local media of an explosion at that shopping centre following the quake, and that certainly kind of the authorities and emergency services en masse descending on that site at the moment to try and rescue those people who are reported to be trapped.
I thought it was interesting, Helen, speaking to a Japanese tourist who was visiting the region just a few moments ago, saying to me that he felt as though the Japanese society needed more focus and attention on the challenges, the dangers, and also the responses to earthquakes. It's notable, is it not, that in the capital, Tokyo, for example, high-rise buildings have an awful lot of capacity built into them to protect against earthquakes. But as we see here, some of these older, more traditional houses and homes and buildings, much more vulnerable. And it appears to be, aside from the shopping centre, that it is these smaller, lower-lying buildings that have really been impacted.
Yeah, and that's often true in Japan. I've covered earthquakes in Japan a number of times before, and that's absolutely right. That Japan has an amazing sort of reputation in many ways of being so prepared and so resilient against this quakes. It is one of the most earthquake-prone countries in the entire world. It gets around 1,500 earthquakes a year, and not many of them turn into mass casualty events, and that is because Japanese architecture, Japanese infrastructure, Japanese warning systems are so well prepared. But exactly as you say, even though the more modern buildings in Japan are very, very well prepared against these sort of things, as well as they can be, given how strong some earthquakes are in that region, it is the older buildings, the more rural locations, that when the earthquakes hit are far more vulnerable. And what appears, we don't want to speculate too much too soon, because we need to find out far more about this particular shopping centre, but it is in a far more provincial part of Japan. It looks, just purely from the kind of images we're seeing on the screens at the moment, to be an older building, and those are the ones that are more vulnerable when these quake hits. And we have to remember that we're talking about very big quakes on the Richter scale. 6.8 is a very, very strong and powerful earthquake. But we have in the past, just within the last year actually, seen two earthquakes that were sort of 7.5, 7.6 on the Richter scale, these huge quakes, which will sometimes result in very, very few casualties. And again, that's because Japan is just so well prepared for these type of events. But as you say, it just depends on where they hit. If they are in these slightly more urban centres, particularly in these slightly more provincial places, the risk is higher because they just don't have quite the same resilience and investment and infrastructure that's been put into some of the more urban centres in Japan.